Welcome back to Rooted Reflections. Hi, friends. I'm Tammy with Resilient Roots Foundation. Each week, we spend a few minutes looking through a different lens at children's behavior, emotions, and everyday struggles. My hope is that you'll leave encouraged, informed, and with a deeper understanding of the children in your life. Today, I want to talk about something every child does, every adult does, and yet something many of us still struggle with: making mistakes. I want to start with a question. When you make a mistake, what is the first thing you say to yourself? Maybe it's, I should have known better. Why did I do that? That was so embarrassing. I do that a lot. I embarrass myself a lot. I make mistakes that are embarrassing a lot. Or maybe you replay the moment over and over, long after everyone else has forgotten about it. I do that too, especially if I think my mistake might have hurt someone else. I will literally go over it and over it and over it. Most of us don't think very often about where those messages came from, but somewhere along the way, we learned something about mistakes. We learned whether mistakes were simply part of learning or something to be avoided. We learned whether it felt safe to get things wrong. And often, without even realizing it, those same messages influence how we respond to the children in our life. After spending many years working with children, thousands of children, I can tell you one thing for certain. Learning is rarely neat. Children learn by trying. They learn by practicing. They learn by forgetting. They learn by trying again. And sometimes they learn by getting it wrong several times before they get it right. I once heard that it takes 400 times, you heard that right, 400 times of modeling and showing a child what to do before they learn it. That's a lot of times. I had a teacher on staff one time, and I think she got very annoyed with me because I would remind her of that. And not only was I saying it to remind her, but I was also reminding myself. 400 times is a lot of times. A perfect example, any teacher working with elementary children and younger will completely understand. It takes this many times or more to be able to have a class walk down the hallway quietly. You would think, right? A child knows how to walk down the hallway quietly with their hands by their side. But guess what? The hallway is a very distracting place for young students. It's filled with other students. It's filled with things on the wall. It's actually filled sometimes with things that you have to walk around and not step on. It's very distracting, especially at the beginning of the school year. You know what? It takes a number of times for a child to learn how to tie their shoes. It's true when they're learning to read. And it's true when they're learning how to handle frustration. Disappointment, conflict are big emotions too. The challenge is that emotional and social skills are harder to see. When a child is learning to read, we expect mistakes. When a child is learning to manage anger, we often expect perfection. But both are skills, and skills take time. Sometimes we see mistakes as evidence that learning isn't happening. But what if mistakes are part of the process? And what if mistakes are actually evidence that learning is happening? Think about a child learning to ride a bike. We don't expect them to hop on and ride perfectly. We expect wobbling. We expect falls. We expect practice because that's how learning works. We start to see less wobbling. They fall less. Yet when children struggle socially or emotionally, we sometimes forget the same principle applies. I think we forget because we can't see it, and maybe we don't know what is happening inside their body. A child may know the rule. A child may know what they should do, but knowing and doing are not always the same thing. Learning takes repetition. Learning takes practice. And learning often includes mistakes. Recently, I've spent some time subbing, and I have loved it. I love coaching, working with families, leading workshops, and all that I do. But I miss being in the classroom sometimes. So this has been the perfect balance. This year, I've spent a lot of time in several classrooms. And today I want to tell you about one student I've gotten to know. This child is so much fun, has silly jokes, and likes to be close. They run to me when they see me, even when I'm not in their classroom. But this same friend has also used very unkind words with me, and they're upset. They struggle. They hit other students. They say hurtful things to adults and to students. They run out of the classroom and hide behind book bags. Because of these behaviors, they spend a lot of time with the principal. They eat silent lunches. They miss recess and face plenty of consequences, including suspension. And yet, the behavior doesn't simply stop. Why? Because when their system goes offline, they can't access the skills they have been taught. Their brain goes into survival mode. We tend to view mistakes in academics differently than mistakes in behavior. When a child gets a math problem wrong, we assume they need more teaching and practice. But when a child struggles with self-control, big feelings, or problem solving, we often assume they should already know better. We forget that our brains are not fully developed until we're in our mid-20s. But yet we assume a child should know these things. That can be hard for adults to understand. We think they are making the same choices over and over, that they know better. But knowing a skill and being able to use it when you're overwhelmed are two very different things. And honestly, if we're adults who still struggle to manage our emotions sometimes, why are we surprised when children do? Especially when many of them are still learning how. But that's a problem. It is a problem, but it's probably a conversation for another episode. A different way to see this is one of the most helpful shifts we can make is moving from why would they do that to what are they still learning? That question changes the conversation. A child who grabs a toy may still be learning patience. A child who melts down may still be learning regulation. A child who says something hurtful may still be learning how to express frustration appropriately. That doesn't mean we ignore the behavior. It doesn't mean that there aren't boundaries or consequences, which is something that I have discussed in a previous episode. It simply means we recognize that correction alone doesn't teach a skill. Children need guidance, patience, and support when those skills are developing. I've shared before that I didn't have a lot of these skills as a young parent. The truth is, I didn't have them when I first stepped into a classroom either. I was a very traditional teacher, and it took years before I started looking for a different way. and retraining my brain. One day, I heard a simple story that changed how I saw children. A teacher placed a basket of counting bears on a table with 4 students. One child quickly gathered up half the bears for himself, and before long, the other children were upset because they didn't have any. They didn't have enough for what they were doing. The teacher came over and asked the child what he was doing with all of those bears. He excitedly shared this elaborate story of what he was creating and everything he was doing. And then she asked, well, how many bears do you really need to make this story happen? And pointed out that the other children were creating stories too. And once he understood, he gladly shared the bears with his friends. The teacher could have assumed he had been selfish or unkind. Other teachers probably would have. Instead, she assumed positive intent. She understood he wasn't trying to take from others. He was caught up in his own idea and simply hadn't thought about how it affected the children around him. This story helped me begin looking at children differently, through a different lens. I wanted to become the kind of teacher who worked through the lens of positive intent instead of immediately assuming the worst. Take a moment and think about the people who helped you grow. Were they the ones who came alongside you and helped you understand what happened and showed you what to do next? For most of us, learning happened because we felt safe enough to try, safe enough to ask questions, safe enough to say, I don't know, safe enough to make mistakes and believe that someone would still be there to help us. Children need that same kind of safety. And again, I discussed this in a previous episode to help you understand what type of safety I mean. It's not a life without limits or responsibility, but the kind of emotional safety that allows them to learn without believing that every mistake says something about who they are. Mistakes are something we do. They're not who we are. And that goes for children too. Our words, our tone, the way we respond can become the bridge that helps children separate what they did from who they are. And that may be one of the greatest gifts we can give them. As we close, I'd like to leave you with a few questions to think about this week. What messages did I learn about mistakes growing up? When a child makes a mistake, do I focus on the mistake or the learning? Is there a child in my life who may need more teaching rather than correction? And perhaps, most importantly, right, because we make mistakes too, am I extending the same grace to myself that I hope to extend to children? Thank you for joining me on this rooted reflection. My hope is that together we begin looking through a different lens at children's behavior, emotions, and everyday struggles. Children are not supposed to know everything. Their brains are still learning. They are not supposed to get everything right the first time. It could take 400 of them. They are learning, and learning is often messy. The good news is mistakes don't mean growth isn't happening. Many times they are evidence that growth is happening. Until next time, keep looking beneath the surface and remembering that every behavior has a story worth understanding. Children learn regulation by experiencing regulation. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give a child isn't fixing the feeling, but helping them understand it. When we stop seeing mistakes as behavior and start seeing them as part of learning, we begin to recognize growth where we once only saw a problem. If you like anything that you've heard today in this episode, please like, comment, share. Help me reach others. Go back and listen to the previous episodes. Rooted Reflections, looking through a different lens at children's behavior, emotions, and everyday struggles. Until next time.